Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am making some polymer clay coffin earrings. Now these are made mostly from scratch. They are super simple and they offer a whole lot of room for creativity. So in today's video, I will be making 3 pairs. For each pair, I am using a different coffin style and also a different method to decorate them with and sharing plenty of inspiration along the way. So please stick around till the end of the video and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get started. So the first thing to do is make your coffin template. I started with a nice straight line, drew half of my coffin shape, and then folded it on the line before cutting it out. And I started with paper and then traced them onto cardboard so that I had some nice smooth shapes with no seams. And you will notice that the bottom width on all of my pieces is about the same. I altered the shape of the coffin by adjusting the height and the width and placement of that side angle. So this one is nice and wide here in the middle. This one is a little bit more narrow and slightly taller, and this one is more narrow and a little bit shorter. And from here on out, I will be referring to these as the wider, the taller, and the shorter style coffin shapes. First up, we have my moon face coffin earrings. I will be using the wider coffin style, and for decor, I am using the most obvious choice, which is more clay. So I have some black clay that I've rolled out fairly thin here, and before I cut out my coffin shapes, I do want to add a little bit of texture. I've got a piece of fabric here, and I just clipped this off of the skirting from an old dress. So I am just going to lay this out and then roll it on gently and peel it off, and it creates a really nice subtle surface texture. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut out both of my coffin shapes, and the next step is color. So I've got some cobalt blue mica powder, and I am going to be covering both pieces and then very gently scrubbing the mica powder away in the centers only. And now I'm going to go ahead and punch out the holes for my jump rings. Now this circle cutter is a little bit larger than what I generally use for earrings, but I think it's a good fit for this particular style. This is what they look like so far, and I am going to do some moon phases over the centers. So I have got a thin sheet of glow-in-the-dark clay here and another round cutter, and I will be using 6 of these little circles, 3 for each earring, but it is best to do them in pairs. So the first 2 circles we're going to go ahead and leave whole, and I am placing them directly in the center between the lower edge and the bottom of the hole for the jump ring. The other 2 pairs are going to be half and quarter moons. So I'm using the same round cutter, and I am going to just trim away half of the first 2 circles and about 3/4 of the remaining 2 circles. The half moons I am going to place just above that center circle facing up, and the quarter moons I am going to place just below that center circle facing down. And now I've got a double-ended dotting tool here that I am going to be using for both texture and adherence on all of those moon shapes. I am starting with the smaller end all over each shape and around the edges, and then I'm going to come back through and make some deeper divots with the larger end. And you just want to be careful that you're not poking through the clay or distorting your shape in any way. And next I want to add some little stars to the background. So I have a nice skinny rope of this glow-in-the-dark clay, and you're going to want to cut this in some longer and shorter sections and group them together in pairs. And we are going to start by very gently rolling the ends to a point and then fitting them together like a cross. Just like this, and you will need about 6 of these. And I am placing 1 star on the center inside corner of each piece, 1 star just above it on the opposite side, and 1 star directly in the center in that bottom space. This is what they look like. I went ahead and staggered some tiny little clay dots in there as well, and these pieces are ready to bake. I am going to bake them at 275 for about 30 to 40 minutes. And for hardware, I am just using 2 larger jump rings and a pair of earring hooks, and I have rotated the eyelet on my earring hooks so the round part is facing me. Here is the finished pair. I sealed these with some UV resin and they turned out fantastic. I love the texture and the coloring, and they look really great in the dark. Now, I'm very fond of the moon phases, but I did play around with different designs for these. I've got some roses here, and any type of floral element will look great with these coffin shapes. And you can certainly use ice screws rather than holes to attach your jump rings. And I also made this one in which I used some of that glow-in-the-dark clay for the border and the snake. And for the background, I used a wider mesh lace and added some rhinestones in there. So definitely play around with different designs. Let's move on to the next pair. Next up is my floating mushroom coffin earrings, and I am going to be using the shorter coffin style, and for decor on these, I will just be pairing them with some charms. So I have another piece of this black clay, and I have rolled it out a little bit thicker this time, and I am going to be using a texture sheet because I want the texture on this to be deeper and more defined. So I am just going to lay this over my sheet of clay, and then I am going to roll it on there a little bit more heavily so that I have a nice deep imprint. Here it is, and now I can go ahead and cut out my coffin shapes. And for color on this pair, I am using some deep violet. I'm going to be applying it with a Q-tip, and I am just putting it on the outside edges of each piece. And now I can go ahead and add the holes for my jump rings in the top, and then we will make the charms. And for charms, I am just using some molded clay pieces. I've got some mushrooms. I also used glow-in-the-dark clay for these, and this is a Coworker brand clay mold. I used this little guy here because he has a nice thick stem, and I just pushed some small ice screws into the tops. So all of these pieces are now ready to bake, and I am baking them exactly the same as the last pair, being careful not to overcook my mushrooms. So once these are baked, I went ahead and sealed them all with UV resin, and I have attached some tiny jump rings to the eye screw on my little mushroom charms. And to put them together, I am going to take my larger jump ring and add my mushroom charm, and then my coffin shape, and then finally my earring hook. Just like this, so that mushroom charm hangs nice and flat against your coffin shape. Here is the finished pair, and again, I really enjoy the coloring and texture on all of these pieces. When it's dark, all you can really see are the little floating mushrooms, and I would like to note that this particular decor method tends to look much better with metal charms. I have these two here that I made, and I was able to find several metal charms that paired really well with my coffin shapes, but unfortunately, I didn't have any matching sets to use for earrings, which is why I chose the clay ones today. These are also much simpler though. For this one, I just used a dotting tool to kind of rough up that surface in the background. And on the other one, I have just made some very subtle wood type lines in there and paired it with a moon charm. So if you have metal charms, I would definitely recommend using those. The third and final pair are my spooky ghost coffin earrings. I will be using the taller coffin shape for these, and for decoration, I am using paint. Now this pair is super simple. We're not using any texture because we want a nice smooth surface to paint on. So I am gonna just cut out both of my coffin shapes and then punch in the holes for my jump rings. And for color, I've chosen this really pretty green to go around the edges, and these pieces are ready to bake. I'm going to bake them at 275 for about 30 minutes, and then I will be hand painting my design on both of them. Here is the finished pair. Now, I painted these off camera because it's very tedious and my eyes are not great, but I did not use a paintbrush for these. I used a sculpting tool. This has a fine pointed silicone tip on one end. That is what I used to do the lettering and the outline of my ghost shapes. And then the dotting tool on the other end, I used just to fill in that outline and add the eyes and mouth. Now you can paint these however you want, but this is a really great way to add text elements to your pieces. I have these ones here. They have some fangs up here on top and they say bite me. And then this pair that I have customized with one of my favorite art quotes. All of these pieces were done using that same tool, and they're not perfect, but for being free-handed without the use of a paintbrush, I think they turned out very well. And the really great thing about this particular method is that once your clay is baked and cooled, the paint should wipe away fairly easily with a damp cloth. So this will require a heavier sealer, but if you happen to make a mistake, you can simply wipe it away and start again. So here are all of the designs that we've explored today. We have the clay, the charms, and the paint. But again, these are very creative. So, you can pair different methods together or try thinking of other things that you can use for decor elements. This one I did the hand out of clay and then used paint rather than texture for the background. And for this one, I've done a skull shape using some tiny rhinestones. And anything skeletal will also look great with these coffin shapes. You can also scale your coffins down or pair them with some smaller shapes for use with post style earrings if you prefer them over the hooks. That is all for today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.